The newly affirmed national chairman of the People's Democratic Party, Dr. Yocha Ayu, has said the mission of the party under his leadership was to rescue the nation from the current mess occasioned by the misrule of the All Progressive Congress APC-led government since 2015. Ayu, who spoke early on Sunday morning, also appreciated the PDP delegates and the party's governor for conducting a smooth and peaceful national convention. Whoever dared the APC to conduct its national convention from over 90 state factional chairmen, while stating that some members of the party thought that the PDP would break up as the aftermath of the convention. Speaking shortly after he emerged as the national chairman of the party, Yocha Ayu says the party is back to take power from the All Progressive Congress in 2023.
From the PDP, and I will be happy that the party will come back together, organize themselves, win power, and reconstruct Nigeria.
What has changed positively since we left? No, you are also a Nigerian. I want you to know that by the grace of the Almighty God, a woman never knows she has a good husband until she tests another one. Now that you have tested another party, you know which party to vote. You are now well experienced to know what is right, especially with the leadership of my brother, Professor Ayu. I have no doubt that we are going to lead to success.
PDP is ready to play its role and to rescue the nation from its current problems. One, we've learned our lesson. Two, they have been disappointed. The promises that were made to them has not been fully fulfilled. That is not to say that the government of the day is not trying its best, but I think they do not have the necessary recipe and know how to take Nigeria forward. So the PDP, based on our experience, we prepared, very prepared, to take Nigeria out of the next level to the proper level.
PDP is not only a democratic party, but it's a very organized party. The APC have not been able to organize a convention in 6 years. They have not been able to organize one convention in 6 years because you cannot give what you don't have. The PDP is organizing a very unique convention, properly organized, and the crowd outside, they are more than the crowd inside, because we did not use 1 naira to mobilize anybody here. But they have seen that once they were blind, and now they can see.
From the look of things, you can see PDP is an organized party. And from what is happening now, you know pretty sure that by the time we got our people fully elected, definitely we are going to revive the party and put the party in a very strong footing.
When other political parties have their congresses, they have 3 congresses in one state and 3 executives or 2 parallel executives. Yeah, we're having 1 convention and almost all our officers are returned unopposed. That shows unity, that shows strength, that shows a new phase of people who together they want to bring the country back to where we left it.
Your take on that shows unity, that shows strength. What's your reading on all? But before then, PDP is back to rescue Nigeria from our current mess, and that's the rhetoric that is going out there. So what's your take on all of this?
Well, that is the rhetoric that we heard in the campaign for the 2019 presidential election, isn't it? That the facts speak for themselves and the country is not in the state that it ought to be. But that didn't quite do the magic for PDP then, now did it? But what PDP has added to that now, to their winning formula so far, we have that ingredient, and the other one being their unity, their ability to really get their internal democracy right, which they're asking us to extrapolate and believe that that's how it will be across the board if they end up in power once again. But it must be admitted that it is a huge feat that they pulled off. 21 officers elect, 18 of them unopposed by consensus. That is very praiseworthy in today's political climate, where all we're told about is tension, riffs here and there, which is why Senator Yocha Ayu was really quite cheeky in throwing down the gauntlet to APC, talking about how they have 92 state chairmen in 36 states. And really that mockery, I had to laugh about that because honestly, it does look bad. But I'm sure APC is watching all of this with keen interest and will get their act together and will be able to deliver a national congress. I'm sure they were waiting for PDP to put their cards on the table, and now they've seen it, so I'm sure they will be back with some kind of response to that. But I really want to commend the courage of Hajia Chiroma, who ran for Deputy National Chairman North. Obviously, she did not win, which I deeply regret, and the fact that the only woman who is an officer-elect today in the PDP is National Women's Leader. That's the only, concession that we get, in spite of the provisions of PDP's constitution, 35% representation, which is really quite unfortunate that that's been observed in the breach. You're only paying lip service to that. It's unfortunate. And another person I really want to commend is Mohammed Suleiman, the national youth leader at the tender age of 25. So that's a remarkable feat for that young man. And I wonder if that is an indication that PDP is going to take seriously the teeming youth population, if there's going to be some kind of outreach, because for me, unity is a major theme that's emerging here. Whether you're talking about internal democracy, or you're talking about national cohesion, or you're talking about the unity of different factors coming together as a viable, credible opposition like what we saw when APC was formed in 2013 with the express purpose of toppling PDP, and it succeeded because all kinds of political heavyweights, put aside their differences, all kinds of strange bedfellows jumped into that APC ship. Yes, many of them didn't last, but mission accomplished. So we do need to see something along those lines. I do believe that the youth do need to come together and make their voices heard.
But another part of that Congress was the fact that some big hitters were missing. Some big elephants in the room were missing. And a lot of people have started permutations. In fact, there was a newspaper headline this morning screaming that the PDP is unsettled as regards the absence of the former president. And somebody will have looked at a time like this where there's been a lot of controversy as regards the former president going to the APC. What will be the lot of the PDP? Some other people are saying there's a big contest on ground as regards which region will get the presidential seat. The PDP currently is saying, okay, we'll open it up, people can vie for it, but which region will get the presidential seat? Some people also talked about the dearth of the fact that at the convention, we didn't have a lot of southern candidates with posters for presidency.
That's Osita
Chidoka enunciated that.
Yes.
That we didn't get a lot of that. So some people are saying, is it a message in the bottle of some sort that they might tilt towards the north? There are also other conversations about what are even the real subjects that political parties should be dealing with now as regards the economy of Nigeria. Because a lot of people said they watched the congresses over the weekend and they just saw the party enunciating rhetorics, but not solutions. The economy is bad. Yeah, people say we've heard that. They've not done anything in 8 years. People say we heard that. And that's always the political narrative. But what are the solutions PDP will bring to the table? A lot of people said, we thought that the former Vice President, Atiku Abubakar, when he had a speech, when he talked about the problems, the nation has never been this bad economically. Some people thought, okay, he would have enunciated one or two solutions to the problem. But a lot of people didn't hear about it. So people said, this party congress, or convention as it is always big on the rhetorics, but not big on the substance. And then leading up to 2023, a lot of Nigerians want substance. What are the parties going to bring forward as a solution to the high inflation rates, the interest rate crisis, some other areas of the economy? Multiple taxation, the VAT conversation.
Do you expect that at a convention or presidential rally? I'm sure we'll ask our guests.
Okay, we'll see all of that.
Might be early days yet.
Thank you so much. That's all on News Headline. We'll take a short break now. When we return, we'll have Michael Wilson and Adeso Amora here in Akejo to give us updates on global business, COVID-19 and sporting activities across the globe. Stay with us.
Welcome back to Morning Show here on Arise News. Moving on to Global Business Update, Michael Wilson joins us now from London. Good morning, Mr. Wilson.
Good morning. As well as obviously the COP26 climate conference and summit dominating most of the headlines, really. It's also an important week for central banks, and a lot of the markets are wondering whether or not some of the central banks have got it wrong, and they may well be raising interest rates or poised to raise interest rates too soon. We'll come on to that. Let's go to the Asia-Pacific markets then, first of all. And the Nikkei, and all of them have been reacting to mixed China factory data. I'll come on to what that mixed data actually is. But the Nikkei actually surging well over 2%, and shares of fast retailing, that's obviously its name suggests, fast retailing, 5% up in Japan. If that's an indication of domestic demand, that's good news for Japan. Huge gains came out. The country's ruling Liberal Democrat Party held on to its single-party majority in the Sunday election. So politics going the way the market wants there. Hong Kong's Hang Seng fell, mainland stocks nudging higher. So there's mixed reports out of China then, and the official Purchasing Managers Index for October came in at 49.2, below the 50 level that indicates some kind of expansion. And it's the second straight month of declining manufacturing expansion in the country. However, a private survey, this is the Cakes in Market Manufacturing, the Cakes in Market Manufacturing PMI came in at 50.6. So mixed signals really coming out of there, depends on what you actually want to believe. Let's go to Singapore, and their top banks are coming up to their reporting season for banks there. OCBC and UOB are scheduled to kick off third quarter earnings. Shares have actually risen generally in Hong Kong and in Singapore as a result of this. The interest really globally is to what impact the Evergrande crisis, continuing crisis in China, will be having on those earnings. Let's go to the United States, and stock futures slightly ahead today. Remember, this is the first trading day of the month, and Dow futures rose about 80 points. Dow Jones rose 5.8% in October, and the S&P 500 6.9%. So if you look at the kind of results, particularly in the S&P 500, about half of the S&P 500 over October in that reporting season, more than 80% of them beat earnings estimates, which is not bad. Let's go to the President of the United States, Joe Biden. He's been at G20 in Italy, and he's been trying to rally leaders about the supply chain problems. The leaders agreed to strengthen and diversify the entire supply chain ecosystem, as they put it, if they can. The White House has previously said that the administration continues to press on those kind of things. Microsoft, for those who worry about these kind of things, has overtaken Apple in terms of market capitalization. It's now the richest company in the world, market cap of 2.49 trillion. While Apple at 2.46 trillion, and that's locked down to Apple reporting, as I brought you on Thursday, that it missed Wall Street's revenue expectations. And back to G7 and back to G20 rather, and Joe Biden and Ursula von der Leyen have come to what they've said is going to be a new era in aluminium and steel trade. It should lead to no more tariffs, as far as that's concerned, between the two countries. Should lead, as they say, to cleaner steel, lower inflation, and improvements in the supply chain problems. So let's go to COP26, and of course everybody's all the world leaders there, many of them all of them really under extreme pressure to mitigate climate change. This is one of the most important diplomatic summits in history. There's no question about that. Through to November the 12th, diplomats and world leaders have sort of downplayed that they're going to get any results of this, capping things to 1.5 degrees Celsius. However, that was mentioned in the official communique overnight, and that's the first time that that aspirational goal has actually been mentioned, as it were, down on paper. So that's quite good. Boris Johnson is hosting it in Scotland and says that there's a huge way to go. If Scotland fails, then everything will fail. So this he reckons it's a crucial summit. He says if Glasgow fails, then the whole thing fails. As far as UK and Brexit's concerned, there's still more discussions. We've talked about fishing now, where back to discussions about the Northern Ireland border, incredibly complicated, but the EU is placing a great deal of pressure on the UK to try to solve it, as both are. Oil is facing a challenging week. We've got OPEC meeting coming up, of course. It's around about sort of 83.60 I'm looking at right now. It was slightly cut by the rise in the US dollar on Friday. OPEC meeting on the 4th, by contrast, the rundown in stocks and US EIA data showing US daily production has shrunk by 150,000 barrels a day. That sort of supported oil prices slightly. Gold, the market described this as an ominous price action. Basically what's happening, it's trying to get over 1,800. It's not going to make it in the near future. 1784 I have it at the moment. It got over to $18.10 an ounce, but that didn't hang on. That's about US yields, and also inverse correlation to a strengthening dollar, which normally happens. So a week ahead, incredibly important, this one. We've got, in no particular order, we've got US jobs coming out on Friday. I think that's going to say an enormous amount about the economies in the world, and also the Fed's interest rate. We've got central bank meeting of the Fed, and also the Bank of England. The threat is that the Bank of England may well be the first significant central bank to put up interest rates. We shall see on Thursday at noon when they come out with that.
All right.
That's the global.
Michael, thank you so much for the insights as always. Our number one question to you will be about what is happening between France and the UK and England as regards fishing. You know, that area is quite nebulous. I want you to throw more light on it as regards fishing, because it looks like a free-for-all. They can't seem to agree. Northern Ireland too is in that deal. And secondly, will be about what is happening in Rome, in Italy, and I'm talking about the G20. This is the last G20 Angela Merkel will attend. What will be the shape of the economy of Europe after Angela Merkel, owing to the fact that Germany is a strong powerhouse and the fact that they have a socialist coming in Olaf Scholz, and the possibility of a Macron trying to tilt the political power to himself? So what's that possible? How's it going to play out for the economy of Europe post-Merkel?
How long have you got? Have you got half an hour?
Go ahead.
Okay, let's deal with fishing and Northern Ireland. Both these debates are now sort of crowding into each other. There's still a lot of acrimony about the unresolved problem of the border between Northern Ireland and Ireland itself. Unfortunately, they're both on the same island, so that's quite a problem. The one being a member of the EU, the one not being a member of the EU. That's what the debate's about. This is continuing. It's getting more and more complicated and more acrimonious, as is the fishing debate. So we have one trawler from Guernsey, I think it is, in Le Havre, which is a French port. The fishermen are still saying, look, you know, it's all right. We understand about politicians grabbing this as being important, but why don't you just let us try to get to so we can have some mutually beneficial trade? It's been going on for years. It's nothing to do with Brexit. It's nothing to do with anything over the past decade. This has been going on since God was a boy, basically. There have always been disputes about who should fish where, and there are lines on maps, but then again, lines on maps, you know, are lines on maps, as we all know from our history lessons, which bored us all those years ago. So what's happening there? It will just continue. I suspect that the rhetoric will ramp up. Good of you to observe that Macron wants to take Europe. Yes, I'm absolutely sure he does. I wouldn't reckon without Germany, though. Germany has got a lot of structural change to take place. It's actually about 10 years back. Yes, it did have its economic miracle, but I don't see it. I don't see it up there in the semiconductor discussions, nor in the artificial intelligence discussions. And Volvo, of course, Swedish car manufacturer, is leading the way in electrical vehicles. Where is Germany in all this? I'm not quite sure. They have an enormous structural change. I'm not saying there'll be problems there, but I think you're quite right. I think Macron will, for his own purposes, and because he's got elections coming up next year, will try to steer France to be the major part of the EU. I don't think it'll happen. I think Germany, still with its big feelers within the ECB, from its history of having the Bundesbank and keeping that Deutsche Mark, if you remember that, solid over all those kind of years, has tradition on its side, and I think will probably win out in a battle. But we're in for an interesting change, and I'm not sorry that we are not linked economically, as it were, in terms of a single currency to Europe, because I think they're going to have big problems.
All right, it's going to be a fight for all for Europe. Thank you so much, Michael. I really appreciate you for your time. All right, that was exactly less than half an hour. For updates on COVID-19 pandemic, Adesuwa Moro is here with us. Adesuwa, great to have you as always.
Thank you so much, Rufai. Good morning, and good morning, Tundum.
Morning.
Now, we're seeing more countries, morning guys, and morning to our viewers. We're definitely seeing more countries resorting to strategies to help to live with the coronavirus as there is restrictions. For instance, Australia is letting in today for the first time in 18 months its fully vaccinated citizens who have been abroad since the pandemic started. But that's not what we were seeing in China, where it all began. China is still keeping in place the stringent restrictions. Of course, it's carrying out mass vaccinations, and of course, it's closing down cities where new infections are being spotted, and that's China. I'll tell you a bit more about China in the course of this update. But very quickly, let's look at the latest figures provided by the Johns Hopkins University. More than 247 million infected. The Johns Hopkins University is also reporting 4.99 million deaths. Some other tallies put it above 5 million deaths since the pandemic began. Meanwhile, over 6.9 billion doses of vaccines have been administered globally. Here in Nigeria, 74 cases and 1 COVID-19 related death were recorded in the last 24 hours in the latest data release by the NCDC. And moving on, still in Nigeria, the NPHCDA has also released its latest data as regards vaccination against COVID-19 in the country. So far, 5.1% of eligible people targeted in the inoculation exercise in the country have received a dose of vaccine, while 2.7% have been fully vaccinated in Nigeria against the COVID-19. And remember, that is for a targeted population. I have to keep saying that. It's not for the entire 200 million population or so. The government is targeting 70% of its entire population. So it's only been able to do 2.7% of that targeted population. I must say it falls below the target of the government's projected estimates. And of course, also the WHO estimates for countries to vaccinate their citizens before the end of the year, or the September deadline that was given earlier. Meanwhile, in Nigeria, renowned virologist and advisor to the government on COVID-19 pandemic, Professor Oyewole Tomori, has been reacting to the travel bottlenecks faced by Nigerians returning to the country. He says Nigeria, like any other country, puts measures such as travel protocols in place to curtail the spread of the virus. Now, his comments are coming days after Nobel laureate Professor Wole Soyinka described the travel requirements as banishments and cumbersome after he was prevented from boarding a flight back to Nigeria at the Charles de Gaulle Airport. He says, while Professor Tomori says that, yes, there might be problems and as a result of technical glitches, Professor Wole Soyinka, on the other hand, is appealing to the Nigerian health authorities and the government agency in charge to fix the challenges and make travel experience seamless for citizens to return home. I know, Tundu, this is very familiar because you have raised this issue way back. Let's move on now. The origin of the COVID-19 pandemic remains unknown and very controversial. In an updated assessment of where the virus began, U.S. intelligence agencies have concluded it was not created as a biological weapon. That must be said. The U.S. spy agencies have now said it was not a biological weapon. However, the declassified paper said a natural origin and a lab leak are both plausible hypotheses. They say the analysis they disagree actually on which is more likely or whether any definitive assessment can be made at all. And this is because China is refusing to cooperate with the global community. They also say they have not been able to access clinical samples of the earliest cases of the COVID-19 in China. But as always, China has responded very quickly. In its response yesterday, Beijing described the U.S. intelligence review into the origins of the pandemic as political and false. The Chinese Foreign Ministry urged Washington to stop attacking China. It also says scientists and not spy agencies should investigate the origins of the virus. Finally, let me tell you this morning, almost 2 years into the pandemic, an island nation of 100,000 population has recorded its very first case of COVID-19. Tonga is the island. It has been able to keep the virus off its border until the weekend, when a fully vaccinated person who arrived on a repatriation flight from New Zealand tested positive. News of the case actually prompted a lot of citizens to get vaccinated in the capital. However, the Prime Minister in Tonga is threatening a lockdown.
Wow, New Zealand traveler, how could you show up there with COVID? Oh, this is awful. They held out for so long, and now there are only 2 places. Is it Tuvalu and Nara in the whole world? We don't believe Turkmenistan, do we? And North Korea, we don't. But, you know, this is really sad, and it just goes to show, with all the efforts that New Zealand made, which we've praised here on numerous occasions, you still had somebody vaccinated spreading this virus. So it just goes to show how important it is the vaccinations are. And the people of Tonga have responded appropriately by rushing to get vaccinated. And we have to constantly be reminded about vaccine equity. It's important that everybody gets the jabs and everybody gets the boosters, because people from New Zealand will land in Tonga or wherever else and spread it. So we cannot be protected, any one of us. No man is an island. It's time for me to wax philosophical now. No island is an island, even, because look at how these people of Tonga now are running helter-skelter, trying to avoid a lockdown, and they're doing the right thing, so they should be commended. Yeah. Which leads me to the story about Professor Tomori. This is the importance of bearing with these minor or even massive inconveniences. You just might be saving somebody's life. You don't want to be that one person who brings COVID into your country and ends up getting somebody killed. I mean, there's a poem I'm really quite obsessed with, Convergence of the Twain by Thomas Hardy, and it's really applicable in many situations. It's about the Titanic. As the Titanic grew, as it was being built, the iceberg that sank it also grew. So you have to think about yourself and think, you don't want to be an iceberg in somebody's life. So if you have to have a few inconveniences at the airport, then frankly, so be it. If there was none of that in the Nigerian airport, we'd be the first screaming that they're massively ineffective and they're being reckless with our lives. So I don't really see an issue with that. As for China, you know, China will always clap back. Always. They will be quick to deny everything. But I'm glad that it's not, or well, it's not looking like COVID was developed as a biological weapon. We're talking about a particular movie we've just watched. So that was the plot of that movie. So we're glad to know that at the very least.
I mean, so for me, I'll start with Professor Tomori. Yeah, great insight. But I think most importantly, that should not remove the fact that we don't feel those measures are strong enough. I don't still feel those measures, even at the airport, for people coming into Nigeria, are strong enough. And I'm saying not on the foreign end, but on the Nigerian end. And this is what I'd like to ask, what is the state of the PCR test they take when they get into the country? How many people truly take those tests? How many people, and what is the verification mechanism for that?
No, they get a call.
You get a call, but a lot of people are slipping up the cracks through that way. So I think that measure should be harder as regards ensuring that travelers that come into the country stay the normal quarantine days before it is lifted, and they do take the test. They don't just get some fabricated test results somewhere. We must still have a way to be able to authenticate all of those things. Because increasingly...
Indeed, Rufai, we've had some cracks and lapses in the past, and you recall that the Nigerian government has responded by seizing passports for not just foreigners, but even Nigerians who their passports have been seized for periods of 6 months or shorter. But I can tell you that before you come into Nigeria, you have to visit the government websites where you have to do a number of things, including receiving what is called a travel permit, which is what Professor Wole Soyinka was not able to get and was prevented from that flight. So in the first instance, you have to have presented a negative PCR test to even board a flight into Nigeria. And when you get into Nigeria, you're supposed to pay for your day 7 PCR test, which I can't say that a lot of people do show up for because they have paid those monies. And if you're called and your result is not found, you'll be found wanting and your passport may have to go for it. And for international travelers, I think they are also banned and fined from the country. I'm not too sure about that, but measures have been put in place by the Nigerian government. And that's what Professor Tomori is saying, that Nigeria, like many other countries, are trying to keep this at bay.
Yeah.
Yes, there might be lapses in the system, but they can be fixed.
But for every time somebody gets called and it doesn't show up because the number is probably not going through or the SIM card has been removed, that could be a COVID case that have just slipped through the cracks. And that's why we must ensure that, we block it. Because, see, Tonga that we're talking about probably took those precautions too. But you still have, that opportunistic case slipping through despite the fact that the person was vaccinated. So you can't be too careful. And we must fight this and help nip this in the bud. Secondly, the other part I'd like to talk about is about this US and China thing. One thing is certain. I don't think maybe during the duration of the COVID-19 virus, we will know where it comes from. But at some point soon, we'll know the truth. And the truth will be that some people didn't do what was supposed to be done. It could be out of Wuhan, it could be out of anywhere. But the most important truth we should uphold is we are not prepared for the next pandemic. And how can we be prepared for the next pandemic? America and China will continue to fight themselves and point accusing fingers. America will say, oh, it might be China. China will say, no, let the scientists do their work. But one truth we have on ground that is confirmed, that is certain at Desua, is the fact that if another pandemic strikes today, it will be as worse as COVID-19 because we're not prepared and we might not have the global solidarity to fight it. At least that we can all agree on. So what do we do about that inconvenient truth on ground?
The billion-dollar question. Well, thank you, Adeswa, for your time this morning.